Quantitative easing, not perhaps the talk of the dog and duck, but a key part of the government and the Bank of England's attempts to revive the British economy. To date, £375 billion has been created by the bank and used to purchase government debt, keep interest rates down and, as a consequence, hopefully stimulate growth. But has QE actually been good for us? Has it worked? And perhaps more to the point, what is it? We sent our reporter David Thompson to find out.
Out and about at the Bank of England. And today's teaser is...
Can you say quantitative easing?
Quantitative easing.
Pardon?
Quantitative easing, can you say
Quantitative. 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 That's difficult, isn't it?
Quantitative easing. No.
Quantitative easing. Hard to say, even harder to spell, trust me. It's not to be confused with QE, Queen Elizabeth, QI, although it is quite interesting, or even the QE2, although there has been more than one phase. So, what is it?
Quantitative easing, or QE, is often described as printing money, but that's actually rather misleading. QE is actually lending from the Bank of England. £375 billion of new money from the Bank of England has been used to buy government bonds. And what that's done is reduced the interest rate on those government bonds and longer-term interest rates generally for borrowers, which has been good for the economy from that point of view, but bad, of course, for savers.
So, it's not actually about printing money. We just like using these shots. But quantitative easing, or QE, has made Britain look like a relatively good bet and allowed politicians to paint a positive picture of their handling of the economy. But is all as rosy as it might seem?
The problem with QE is it lets politicians off the hook. Here in the UK, we have a coalition government. Pretty much hampered, then there's not much they can do. And therefore, you've got the Bank of England doing all the heavy lifting, all by monetary policy. It's all based on interest rates. It's not based on fiscal policy, which is taxation and spending.
And some people think the money could have been used better.
One of the problems with QE is that effectively this new money that's come from the Bank of England ends up just washing around financial markets. You could use QE to fund the new British Investment Bank to get lending to small businesses going. You could use QE to fund the Green Investment Bank to help renew our infrastructure. You could also fund housing associations to start building new homes again. In Germany, the State Investment Bank there is funding the retrofit of all the existing homes to bring down energy costs.
A new man will be taking over at the helm of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, generally held to be something of a banking rock star and headhunted by George Osborne from the Bank of Canada. So, is he a QE fan, or will he try something else?
Given the slow progress of the economic recovery, it's certainly on the cards we could have more QE. Now, when Mark Carney comes in as the new governor this summer, it gives the bank an opportunity to review how it's doing QE. He might well bring in some new ideas from his experience in Canada and seeing what's happened in North America. So I think it certainly is a good opportunity for the bank to start using new tools to try and be more effective in stimulating the economy.
It might not exactly trip off the tongue, but quantitative easing is a big part of our economic life, and it might be around for some time to come.
Quantitative easing.
Says it better than most people in the studio. With me in the studio now, the economist Leigh Caldwell and our guest of the day, Ros Altmann. Leigh Caldwell, is it working, quantitative easing? There's no growth.
Quantitative easing is really the only thing that stood between us and the fate of Spain and Greece. Spain and Greece, Spain particularly, was in a very similar situation to the UK 3 or 4 years ago, running a government deficit of between 5 and 10% a year, having to bail out their banks. They didn't have the option of their own central bank, which could print money to help finance that. So the Bank of England has essentially allowed the British government to continue its deficit spending policy, which it's been forced to do, really, to keep the economy at least on some kind of even keel. And so we've not had the same rise in unemployment and the same level of collapse in growth that, and indeed negative growth that Spain and Greece have had.
Well, Ros Altmann, you might not like it, but we'd be worse off without it, says Leigh Caldwell.
That's always the Bank of England's argument. And of course, because it's happened, we can't prove what would have happened if it hadn't. But
we haven't gone the way of Spain and Greece, you could argue.
Well, maybe not short term, but that's because we've got a free currency. That doesn't mean that actually we've solved the problems at all. And what what QE does is it creates new money, ostensibly to ensure that bank lending will support the economy. Actually, it hasn't worked. You've driven down long-term interest rates, but because of the side effects of QE, which are particular to the UK economy, you've actually weakened growth in other areas. So although you've got one foot on the accelerator, you've got the other foot on the brake. We've got double-dip recession. It's not like the economy's done well as a result of QE.
And we could have figures showing GDP might have contracted again.
We may have a triple-dip recession. I hope not. But we've had inflation, which has been much higher than other areas. That has hurt consumption. So actually, I don't think QE has worked at all.
But what would you have done instead, Ros Altmann? The point is, would you have done some quantitative easing? Would you have had some money being circulated by the Bank of England and then stopped it now?
Effectively, the first round of this printing new money might have been worth trying in 2009. We were clearly heading for a major catastrophe. Now, it's an experiment, and maybe that would have worked. The next two rounds, I think, were just trying to help the government finance the fiscal deficit and, in a way, trying to fool the markets that our economy isn't as bad as it otherwise would look. But we should be using new money to underpin investment directly in the economy.
Let's point to those. It's masking, as was said, it's actually masking the true state of the economy and stopping decisions being made to bring us into growth, to stimulate the economy. And then we'll come on to investment.
Well, the Bank of England would argue that it's not its job to decide whether to invest in infrastructure, whether to invest in a green bank or these kind of things. The Bank of England's job is to provide the money that the economy needs, and then the government's job is to decide how to spend that, and that through deficit spending. Now, I would not say that QE is the only thing that should be done. I do personally, I think that government should invest more, that the economy does need to continue its transition from a finance and housing-based economy of 5 years ago to a more broader-based economy now. And inflation is a part of that. Deficit spending is a part of that. QE is necessary to help that process happen. And yes, there are some negative effects. Most economic decisions have pluses and minuses.
Right, but what would you say to anyone retiring and trying to buy a private pension in the past year or two who has lost, undoubtedly has lost potential income that they'll never get back?
I sympathise with those people. The value of pension assets over the last few years has been substantially higher than it would otherwise have been without QE. So the trade-off is the pension fund is larger. The stock market's gone up by about 50% since 2008. But yes, long-term rates are lower, so there is a trade-off there. I understand that Ros's viewpoint is about helping pensioners. That's your specialism, but we can't sacrifice the whole economy for that. The Bank of England has to have a broader view.
I think my view is that what we've done is we've taken money away from people who don't have big debts and could be spending it, and we frightened them into stopping spending. We've impoverished a whole group of older people. We've, if you like, emasculated the grey pound. The inflation rates that we've faced have been much higher for older people. They have cut their spending. So by introducing a policy which is supposed to stimulate growth, you've actually hurt growth from those groups of people who could have spent it. Anyone buying an annuity, anyone coming up to retirement, the value of their pension fund has not gone up more than the fall in the value of the annuities they're buying.
But the argument goes that without quantitative easing, interest rates may well have gone up. Now, that would have hurt an even bigger group of people, surely.
We've got to differentiate between long-term and short-term interest rates. Actually, what is crucial for the economic position of the UK is short rates. Mortgage rates are dependent on short-term interest rates. The fact that long rates come down doesn't make much difference to consumer spending. Most key rates depend on short rates. Therefore, pushing down long-term interest rates has just had this negative impact because of the term structure of the private sector UK balance sheet, where pushing down long rates hurts companies sponsoring pension schemes, hurts people buying pensions, and has actually caused a problem for corporate UK as well as for the household sector.
Now, you've said that QE is designed to solve a psychological problem, which implies it's actually nothing to do with practical economics?
Well, the two are very closely linked, psychology and economics. There's a particular psychological problem called money illusion, which is the reason that the Bank of England aims for a positive inflation rate, and where if inflation were allowed to fall lower to 0 or 1%, it would hamper the adjustment of the economy, because people don't want wage cuts, they don't want to accept price cuts, but a little inflation allows the economy to be more flexible and adjust.
But inflation at the moment, of course, is killing people in terms of standard of living. Their wages are worth less, their spending power is worth less. So any policy that was to keep inflation higher, and it's missed its 2% target for month after month, is just going to make life even more difficult for consumers.
Well, remember that inflation is a reflection of people's wages increasing as well as cost increasing, and wages are increasing, probably not quite as fast as costs, but they are going up maybe 2%, where costs are going up 2.7%. So the effect on wages is not as high as it's sometimes thought to be.
All right, Leigh Caldwell, thank you very much. Thank you. It's the time of year